Chapter 1 Introduction to Conditioning. Ever wondered how habits form? Or perhaps why certain stimuli trigger particular responses? Today, dive into the fascinating world of psychology to uncover the answers. The keys? Classical and operant conditioning. Classical conditioning, to start, is a learning process that occurs when two stimuli are repeatedly paired. A response that at first is elicited by the second stimulus is eventually elicited by the first stimulus alone. This concept was first introduced by the Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov through his experiments with dogs. Chapter 2 Classical Conditioning. To illustrate, imagine the sound of a bell. On its own, it doesn't mean much. However, pair it with the presentation of food to a dog multiple times, and something interesting happens. The dog begins to salivate at the sound of the bell alone. This is because the dog has learned to associate the bell with the food. The bell, initially a neutral stimulus, becomes a conditioned stimulus. And the dog's salivation becomes a conditioned response. Chapter 3 Operant Conditioning. On the other hand, operant conditioning, developed by B.F. Skinner, is a method of learning that involves rewards and punishments for behavior. It is through operant conditioning that voluntary behavior is learned. Consider a laboratory rat in a box with a lever. When the rat presses the lever, a food pellet drops into the box. After repeated lever pressing and food rewards, the rat learns that lever pressing results in food. This is positive reinforcement. The behavior, lever pressing, is strengthened by a reward, food. But operant conditioning isn't just about rewards. It also involves punishment, which weakens behavior. Imagine the same rat receives a mild electric shock every time it presses the lever. The rat will quickly learn to avoid that behavior. Chapter 4 The Takeaway. So, what's the takeaway from all this? Classical and operant conditioning are two fundamental concepts in psychology that explain how behavior is learned and shaped. Classical conditioning shows how a neutral stimulus can, through association, become a conditioned stimulus that triggers a conditioned response. This is the process whereby we learn to associate certain stimuli with specific responses, like feeling hungry at the smell of cooking. Operant conditioning, on the other hand, shows how behavior is shaped by consequences. It can be strengthened through rewards or weakened through punishments. This process is fundamental in understanding how voluntary behavior is learned and how habits form. In essence, these learning principles influence much of our daily behavior. So the next time you notice a habitual response or find yourself reacting to a certain stimulus, remember, it's all a part of the fascinating world of classical and operant conditioning.